The mask you call yourself. What you present to the world every single day is not you. It's a costume you built to survive rejection. From childhood, you learned which parts of yourself earned love and which parts earned punishment. So you buried the punished parts and polished the rewarded ones into a smiling, socially approved mask. Over years, you wore this mask so consistently that you forgot it was ever a performance. You started believing the mask was your identity. This is the most uncomfortable truth about human beings. Almost nobody you meet, including yourself, is operating from their authentic core in public. Every polite smile, every "I'm fine", every carefully chosen social media post is a brick in a wall built to hide what's underneath. The shocking part isn't that people lie to others, it's that people lie to themselves so completely they no longer notice the lie. The mask becomes so comfortable that removing it feels like death, even though keeping it on is what's slowly killing your real self. The darkness. You refuse to own everything you hate, judge, or condemn in another person exists inside you too, just buried deeper and denied harder. Society teaches you that anger, jealousy, greed, and cruelty are bad, so instead of learning to manage these forces, you simply pretend they don't exist within you. But energy doesn't disappear, it goes underground. The traits you refuse to acknowledge don't vanish. They leak out sideways in passive aggression, sudden rage, self-sabotage, or an unexplainable dislike of certain people who mirror what you've rejected in yourself. This is the disturbing part. The people who claim to be the nicest are often sitting on the most repressed darkness because suppression requires enormous psychic effort. The angrier someone gets when you point out their flaws, the more likely those flaws are true. Real strength isn't pretending you have no darkness. It's staring directly at it, naming it, and choosing what to do with it. Until you do that, your darkness will keep choosing for you, disguised as bad decisions, broken relationships, and self-destruction you can't explain. You hate in others what you can't face in yourself. This is one of the cruelest tricks the mind plays. Whatever irritates you most intensely about another person is usually a mirror of something unresolved in you. You call someone arrogant because a hidden part of you craves the confidence to be seen. You call someone fake because you're terrified of being exposed as fake yourself. This mental defense mechanism protects your fragile self-image by throwing your own unwanted traits onto someone else's screen so you can attack them out there instead of confronting them in here. It feels righteous, it feels justified, but it's often self-betrayal wearing the costume of judgment. The shocking implication is that your enemies, the people who annoy you the most, are actually your greatest teachers. They are showing you for free exactly what you refuse to examine in yourself. Every time you catch yourself with intense, disproportionate irritation towards someone, that's not information about them. That's a flashing red arrow pointing directly back at your own unhealed wound, waiting to be acknowledged instead of projected. Every human being secretly wants power. Strip away the polite language, the charity work, the humility talk, and underneath almost every human interaction lies a quiet hunger to influence, control, or dominate the environment around them. This isn't evil by default, it's survival wiring. But because society punishes open ambition, people learn to disguise their hunger for power as kindness, humility, or spirituality. The selfless friend who always gives advice may be feeding a need to feel superior. The person who insists they don't care what others think often cares intensely, enough to announce it repeatedly. This desire for power isn't shameful. Hiding it is what makes it dangerous because unacknowledged power hunger leaks out through manipulation, guilt-tripping, and quiet control games instead of honest ambition. The people who scare you most aren't the ones who admit they want influence. They're the ones who insist they want nothing while subtly engineering every room they enter. Admitting this hunger openly is uncomfortable, but it's the only way to wield it consciously instead of unconsciously. Ordinary people are capable of real evil. History and psychology agree on something deeply unsettling. Cruelty doesn't require monsters, it only requires the right conditions. Ordinary, kind, rule-abiding people have committed horrifying acts simply because authority told them to, or because a crowd normalized it, or because their identity was threatened. This isn't a story about bad people out there. It's a mirror held up to everyone, including you. The comforting belief that "I could never do that" is exactly the blind spot that makes ordinary people dangerous, because it removes their guard. The moment you believe you're incapable of cruelty is the moment you stop watching for it in yourself. Real moral strength doesn't come from denying your capacity for darkness. It comes from staying humble enough to know that under enough pressure, fear, or group pressure, almost anyone can cross lines they swore they never would. This truth isn't meant to frighten you into hopelessness. It's meant to keep you awake, alert, and accountable for the choices you make when nobody's watching. Wholeness comes from facing the dark, not fighting it. The final, most liberating truth is this: you will never become powerful, peaceful, or free by pretending your dark side doesn't exist. Real transformation doesn't come from perfecting your mask. It comes from integrating everything you've hidden beneath it: your anger, your jealousy, your ambition, your fear. People who appear the most grounded and unshakable aren't the ones without darkness. They're the ones who've had the courage to face theirs directly, own it, and channel it instead of denying it. Suppressed darkness controls you from the shadows. Acknowledged darkness becomes raw material for strength. This is deeply uncomfortable to hear because it means the self-help idea of "just think positive" is incomplete. True growth demands you look at the parts of yourself you'd rather bury forever. But here's the reward. The moment you stop fighting your own shadow and start listening to it, you gain access to an entirety of yourself that was always there, waiting. And that wholeness is where real, unshakable confidence finally begins. What if everything you believe about yourself is a lie you were trained to tell? What if the good person you see in the mirror every morning is nothing but a mask stitched together from other people's approval, and underneath it lives someone you've spent your entire life running from? What if the people who annoy you the most are actually showing you exactly what you refuse to face in yourself? What if your kindness, your humility, even your love are sometimes just disguises for a hunger you were taught to hide? Today, we're not going to comfort you. We're going to show you the parts of human nature that psychology confirms, history proves, and almost nobody has the courage to say out loud. By the end of this, you won't see yourself, or anyone else, the same way again. What if everything you believe about who you are is nothing more than a performance you've repeated so many times, you forgot it was ever an act? Every one of us walks through life wearing a mask. Not because we're liars by nature, but because somewhere in childhood we learned that certain parts of us were welcomed and other parts were punished. So we buried what got punished and polished what got rewarded, until the mask became so familiar we mistook it for our true face. And here is the disturbing part. Most people you know, including the ones closest to you, are performing a version of themselves they built for approval, not the self that actually exists underneath. Beneath that mask lives something every human being carries but almost nobody admits to owning: a shadow. Anger, jealousy, greed, cruelty. We are told these are flaws to eliminate, so instead of learning to master them, we deny they exist. But denied energy does not disappear. It goes underground, and it resurfaces sideways, in outbursts you can't explain, relationships you sabotage, and a strange, disproportionate hatred toward people who remind you of exactly what you buried. And that is the second uncomfortable truth. The people who irritate you the most are rarely showing you something about themselves. They are showing you something about you. Whatever trait enrages you instantly in another person is usually a trait you have never allowed yourself to face. We call it judgment. It is often a mirror. Strip away the polite language and the humility, and you will find something else hiding underneath almost every human interaction. A quiet hunger for power. Not evil, not shameful, simply human. But because open ambition is punished socially, that hunger disguises itself as kindness, as advice-giving, as spirituality, as "I don't care what people think," said loudly, again and again, by people who clearly do. The danger was never in wanting influence. The danger is in hiding that want so deeply that it leaks out as manipulation instead of honest ambition. And here is the truth that history refuses to let us forget. Cruelty does not require monsters. It only requires the right conditions. Ordinary, decent, rule-following people have done horrifying things simply because authority told them to, or a crowd normalized it, or their identity felt threatened. The belief, "I could never do that," is not protection. It is the exact blind spot that makes good people dangerous, because it removes their guard. So, where does that leave us? Not in despair, in freedom, because the final truth, the one that changes everything, is this. You will never become strong by perfecting your mask. You become strong by finally facing what's underneath it. The people who seem the most grounded, the most unshakable, are not the ones without darkness. They are the ones who stopped running from theirs, looked directly at it, and turned it into fuel instead of poison. You do not need to destroy your shadow. You need to stop pretending it isn't there. The moment you do that, you stop being controlled by the parts of you that operate in secret, and you finally become whole. The truth about human nature was never meant to make you feel ashamed. It was meant to make you awake. Every mask, every projection, every hidden hunger for power, every capacity for darkness you've read about today lives in you, not because you are broken, but because you are human. The people who change their lives are not the ones who pretend these forces don't exist. They are the ones brave enough to look directly at them, name them, and finally take back control. You now know something most people will spend their entire lives avoiding. What you do with that knowledge is entirely up to you. Good luck on your journey of facing what's real. Thank you for watching and for having the courage to hear the truth. Most people are too afraid to speak.